Hello, and welcome to the ProjectWise Administrator Advanced Accreditation course on Managed Workspaces. In this lesson, you will get an overview of the ProjectWise Managed Workspace process. In this lesson, we will present an overview of the Managed Workspace process. Why just an overview? Just like in the first one, we want to understand the overall concepts without getting into too much detail. During this lesson, we will learn what is a managed workspace, how that's a copy-out process. We'll demonstrate the managed workspace. We'll look at configuration settings block, what these things look like, and how CSBs are applied. We'll also look at the additional levels of configuration that are provided in managed workspaces, as well as the order of precedence of how CSBs are applied on objects. The following are a few key points to remember about a ProjectWise managed workspace. First of all, the ProjectWise Explorer client is required to utilize a managed workspace. This cannot be done through ProjectWise Drive or ProjectWise Web. A managed workspace is where all or some of the workspace files are stored in ProjectWise. Some can be locally, but they're just not managed with ProjectWise. The configuration is initiated by a ProjectWise configuration assigned to the file. When configuration variables resolve to a ProjectWise folder or file, the managed workspace copies those files out. And it copies these files out to the DMS folder structure. The copying out of these files is stored in the ProjectWise database. This image shows an example of what the copy out process looks like. The process begins by downloading all the reference files, then creates a configuration, downloads all the workspace files, and opens the application. The second time it opens a file, it checks for the delta of reference files, changes to the configuration, downloads the delta of the workspace files, and reopens the application. This second process is much quicker. Let's now look at a demonstration. Keep in mind that a minimum configuration requires three variables: USTN configuration, USTN workspace name, and USTN workset name. Let's now look at the application. You'll see here we have ProjectWise Explorer open. We're going to open the alignment DGN. But note, we have a configuration folder. There's an example folder, which is the workspace root, and example is the name. We have MetroStation is the workset, so MetroStation would be the workset name. Let's go and look at ProjectWise Administrator. While in ProjectWise Administrator, we can look under the Workspaces, Managed, and the Predefined section, and we see that we already have a CSB defined here. Let's look at the properties of this CSB. If we look on the Configuration tab, we will see, after we've expanded it, the variable USTN configuration and its location within the ProjectWise data source. We also see that we have workspace name defined as example and locked, and we have workset name defined as MetroStation, and we've locked that as well. Let's click OK and close this. Cancel so we don't save any changes. Then we will go back to ProjectWise Explorer. Once in ProjectWise Explorer, let's apply the CSB to MetroStation. So we right-click on MetroStation, select Properties, select Workspace, right-click on Predefine, click Add Association, and we click Minimum Connect Configuration. That's the one that we showed you in ProjectWise Administrator, and we apply that and click OK. As we look at the DMS folder for this data source, we see that it's empty. That's because no workspace files have been copied out, nor have we checked out any files. We'll come back later and see how this gets populated with the managed workspace. So we now open the file. This may take a minute. We see here the process of copying out the files. It first copied out the configuration files noted. It then looks for any workspace files that have been resolved from analyzing the configuration. It then creates a CFG file that launches the application. We'll review that in a few minutes. First, let's check to make sure that the proper workspace and workset are enabled. And we see here MetroStation and example are the proper workspace and workset. Let's go in and check some variables now. We go to the variables dialog box. That will take a second to come up. With the dialog box up, let's set a filter to USTN so that we can see the framework variables. We can then browse down to some of the variables we set, as well as a few other. Note the USTN configuration location is pointing to the ProjectWise location, as it should. We check workset's root. That's pointing to the proper location. Workspace name is set to MetroStation. Workspace root is set as well as the workspace name. Let's close the dialog box. As we go back and look at the DMS folder structure, we now see that it is populated with DMS folders. These contain the workspace files themselves, but in the DMS folder structure. If we go down to the bottom, we'll see a folder called Workspace. Let's open that up. We open that in Notepad. With that open in Notepad, just quickly browse down through the configurations. This is the configuration file that the application opens with. So it's kind of like a debug, but it's the actual configuration. So it's very useful in troubleshooting the load process. We'll talk about this file more when we look at troubleshooting. Let's now go back and close MicroStation. Then we'll go through and review Local Document Organizer to see what files we've checked out. Let's go into Tools, Local Document Organizer, check on copyouts, and we see that ProjectWise has recorded all the files that were copied out in the Managed Workspace process. Let's close that. Now let's reopen the file and see how quickly it opens. We see a little bit of processing, but because of the Delta process, it doesn't have to copy out all the files the second time around. So therefore, the process is much quicker. So, what initiates a managed workspace? Special configurations that point to ProjectWise locations and configuration settings blocks. So we reviewed a little bit of what a configuration settings block is, but let's look at that in a little bit more detail. The CSBs are stored in the data source, and they can be applied to most ProjectWise objects like folders, files, user groups, data source, etc. They can be edited only in ProjectWise Administrator. So there are various levels to CSBs. We note that there are predefined, global, application, customer, organization site, workspace, workset, role, and user. There are more levels in ProjectWise than there are in MicroStation. A review of applying CSBs, we select the object, select the Workspace tab, select the level that the CSB was created on, and right-click Add Association. These next two slides are advanced in their content, but you will find them helpful if you are trying to diagnose or troubleshoot the loading of CSBs. With that said, let's look next at how CSB levels integrate with standard MicroStation levels. The simple answer is they typically are inserted when a higher configuration level is detected. This is probably better illustrated than explained verbally. So let's look at how this actually works with the out-of-the-box configuration. First, ProjectWise Explorer reads the command line switches, then gathers predefined variables out of the application. It then inserts the predefined CSBs. When the process finds the application level, it inserts the global level CSBs. When the process finds organization level, it inserts the application level CSBs. ProjectWise Explorer excludes the reading of the personal UCF at this point so that it does not read the workspace and workset name out of that file. As can then be expected, when it sees the workspace CFG files, it then loads the customer and organization/site CSBs so that workspace name and workset name can be defined in the CSBs. These CSBs need to be loaded prior to encountering the workspace and workset levels. The next CSB level that needs to load is the role level. So when the next user level is encountered, the role CSB is loaded. Following that, the user CSBs are loaded, and then the personal user CSBs are loaded. Significant changes were made to the MS config file for the 1017-based products. This was to account for the managed configuration capabilities. So let's take a look and see what those differences are. The process is exactly the same until we get down to the cache UCF file. At this point, the user level is encountered. Therefore, it loads customer, organization, workspace, workset project, and role prior to encountering that user level configuration file. Next, it will then read the cache UCF, workspace, workset, role, and user CFG files. It will then load the user CSB and the personal CSBs. Let's look at the order of precedence of how CSBs will load on the multiple objects within ProjectWise. First, we load on the data source, then user list, groups, then users, then folders, then application, then lastly the file. So, during this lesson, you have learned what is a managed workspace, how it's a copy-out process. You've seen a demonstration of the managed workspace. You've seen what configuration settings blocks are, what CSBs look like, how CSBs are applied. We've looked at the additional levels in ProjectWise Managed Workspace, as well as the order of precedence in which they are applied.
If you found this video helpful, please give it a like. If you want to see more such series, consider subscribing to our channel. Thank you, and see you next time.